All right, so thank you everybody for joining us for our spring webinar series. This is our Interpersonal Effectiveness, Better Conversations, Better Relationships, and that is presented by Sonia Simmons. She is our registered social worker here at Niagara North. And with that, I will hand it over to Sonia.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to my webinar. I'm really excited to talk about today's topic. I'm going to share some information about the whys and hows of communication so you can incorporate them into your own lives to have better communication and stronger relationships. First, I would like to give a disclaimer before we start today's webinar. So Niagara North Family Health Team assumes no responsibility or liability for any errors or omissions in the content of this webinar. The information provided in this webinar is for general information purposes only. We make no representation of any kind regarding the accuracy, validity, reliability, or completeness of any information in this webinar. Any websites or links are not endorsements. The content in this webinar is not a substitute for professional or medical advice. So I want to share a little bit something about myself and something personal, which is why I decided to run this webinar. Like Alicia said, I'm a registered social worker with Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers. And something personal about me. As a child, I became really shy around age 5 or 6 and had 1 or 2 close friends. I was a classical pianist and was always terrified of performing in front of an audience or in competitions. In high school, I had a small circle of friends, but it would be too much for me to stay long at anyone's house or party. It wasn't until I started university that I came out of my shell and opened up to people. I'm still anxious in certain social environments or large crowds, but I have learned a lot of strategies to help me manage my anxiety. I can cope easier and feel better about myself, but it's a lifelong process. I hope sharing what I've learned from my personal experience about managing anxiety and the interpersonal skills I teach people can help you too. So let's get started. So it's important to note that we all learned how to communicate, whether non-verbally and verbally, including sign language, from a very young age. We adapted and refined our communication styles through social learning and trial and error. The ways we communicate our needs can be effective most times, and other times it can be ineffective and sever or tear apart important relationships. If you notice a pattern or suddenly the way you communicate is no longer working, then it's important to stop and question yourself, why do I communicate this way? After you're able to understand and acknowledge the whys, then it's much easier to bridge towards changing the way you communicate, the hows-tos, so you can maintain or improve relationships with your partners, colleagues, friends, family members, and so on. Here is what we're going to cover today. So I titled the first part, Why Can't We All Just Get Along? Have you ever asked yourself, why am I always arguing with my partner? Or why can't I get along with my boss or coworker? I'll share with you some possible reasons and give you some tips on how to not have verbal wars with the people you care about, but to use some effective strategies to fight fair. Even if you don't like the person, these strategies will work too. The second part I titled, To Say Yes or No, That is the Question. I think you can agree that most of us have a hard time deciding whether to say yes when someone asks something of us, like money, a ride, or our time. But some people who may describe themselves as people pleasers have a tendency to say yes more often than no. So in this section, we'll talk about why people pleasers have a hard time saying no. Then I'll share some helpful strategies on how to set healthy boundaries for yourself. Whether you're a people pleaser or not, we can all benefit from setting healthy boundaries. I titled the third part, I Don't Trust You and I Need Help. In this section, I'll explain why it's hard for some people to trust others, even people they are close to. Then I'll give you some helpful strategies on how to reach out and ask for help. Lastly, the last part, we'll talk briefly about being alone, loneliness, and social isolation. Even if you live with somebody, you may still feel lonely. For some people, like myself, I love being alone. For others, feeling lonely and isolated is an awful feeling. I'll share some tidbits on how to feel less lonely, making friends with yourself, and making new friends. So here's the first part. Psychologists Dr. John Gottman and Robert Levinson began studying couple interactions and conflicts in the 1970s and 1980s. Gottman came up with the four horsemen as predictors of relationship destruction and high rates of divorce. The four horsemen was officially coined by the late 1990s. The four horsemen include criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. When two people are in conflict, one of these four or a combination of these four horsemen show up in conversation. Well, let's go through each one. Criticism. When a person uses words that are harsh and hurtful, targeting the other person's character or personality. For example, why do I have to remind you to wash the dishes every night? You're so lazy. You never do anything I tell you. Contempt. When a person chooses to go far beyond criticism by making put-down remarks and name-calling, using mockery and sarcasm, and being disrespectful towards the other person. The perpetrator assumes a position of moral superiority over the victim. For example, you're tired? Whatever. I get up early, make the kids' lunches, pick them up from school, clean the whole house and cook dinner, and all you do is go to work. You're a lazy SOB. Defensiveness. When a person feels threatened or attacked, they will use excuses to make the other person stop arguing. Unfortunately, this typically doesn't work and makes the other person resentful because the person being defensive is appearing not to take accountability for the mistakes or takes the person's concerns seriously. For example, I have a lot going on and too much to think about. I'm already stressed as it is. You're home, so why can't you just wash the dishes? And the last one is stonewalling. This happens usually in response to contempt. When a person is feeling attacked over and over again, they may respond by shutting down, ignoring, appearing disinterested, or disengaging by distracting themselves with other activities. Unfortunately, this response can escalate the conflict by making the perpetrator continue arguing. For example, you hear your partner yelling, so you stop listening. You look away or down with arms crossed over your chest. You start walking away and rummage through magazines on the coffee table. You pick up a magazine and start leafing through it, keeping your head down. You can hear your partner's voice getting louder and continue to argue. If you've ever experienced any of the above, or you are one of the ones who are using any of the four horsemen, you're not alone. Every relationship has experienced this one way or another, and at some point during a relationship. Unfortunately, there are antidotes or ways to communicate more effectively with your partner. But first, let's explore why do couples argue in the first place. So here are some typical reasons why couples argue. As I'm listing them, see if you can relate to any of these reasons in your own relationships. Relationship imbalance and unmet needs. So no relationship is 50-50, but if one partner is doing all the chores and child rearing and the other partner is cooking dinner only on the weekends, for example, then there is an apparent imbalance of family responsibilities. Solution? Work together to decide what is fair delegation of family responsibilities. You can write out all responsibilities, then either decide who takes on what or share responsibilities, but it's important to be clear. Plus, keep communication open if there's any changes. Past resentment. Who doesn't have past unresolved arguments? Some past resentments may include your partner forgetting something important or somebody doing behavior you don't approve of over and over again. For example, your wife forgetting an anniversary or birthday, a partner overspending, a partner feeling the need to give too many reminders to complete a chore, etc. Solution. Remind yourself, even though it can be difficult to do at times, that the past is the past. You can't change the past. This warrants repeating. The past is the past, and you can't change the past. Gently redirect or focus your attention to the here and now, meaning focus on the issue at hand in the moment. Bring your attention to what you notice now. I will talk about other tidbits in a few slides on what to say and how to communicate, so we are addressing concerns in the present moment. Childhood attachment issues or deep emotional wounds. I just want to share briefly, there are 4 attachment styles, and every child would experience at least one of them from their primary caregivers while growing up. There's anxious preoccupied, dismissive avoidant, fearful avoidant or disorganized, and secure attachment style. The first three are insecure attachment styles. Anxious, preoccupied attachment style means you want closeness but fear abandonment. Dismissive avoidant means you crave independence and avoid intimacy. Fearful avoidant means you want closeness from others but also fear it. And the last one, secure attachment, means feeling secure, trusting, and closeness with no problems expressing emotions. If you have experienced an unhealthy and insecure attachment style and upbringing, it may influence how you respond to your partners or other people you care about in the present. The good news, attachment styles are not fixed, meaning you can learn how to develop and establish strong, healthy relationships. Hopefully, this webinar acts as a good starting point. So solution from these attachment styles or emotional wounds may be to seek out therapy to heal from past relational or interpersonal traumas. Emotional discontrol. So some people are born emotionally sensitive, yet are raised in environments that didn't understand how to cope or manage their strong emotions. Whenever they felt emotions, they were either punished or criticized for having personal emotional experiences their brain was designed to have. As a result, they learned how to stop feeling or become confused about what was right to feel. And then as an adult, when they start to feel intense emotions, they either learn to shut down or go into a rage because they lack the opportunity to learn how to self-regulate. When you have emotional discontrol, it's hard to communicate your needs effectively and clearly. A solution? Practicing mindfulness skills that soothe the nervous system, such as paced breathing, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding exercises, dropping anchor, and many more can be helpful. Unresolved long-standing problems. You've probably heard of the saying, carrying a lot of baggage, right? Well, we all carry some baggage, some more than others. Part of the problem is if we bring our baggage to our current conversations, we end up bringing up old baggage over and over again. The result? We end up carrying more baggage instead of unpacking the first bag, which brings in more problems and constraints in our relationships until our baggage explodes or breaks apart. Then we're left to pick up the scattered pieces. If we don't find healthy and effective ways to eliminate or reduce our baggage, we end up constantly fighting uphill battles. Solution? Possibly seek out professional mental health support to heal from past unresolved problems. Or accept that you can't change what happened in the past, let it go, and focus your attention on what truly matters to you, your family and friends, hobbies, work, and so on. So here's to start with some tidbits. So let's face it, inevitable that we will all have disagreements and arguments in relationships. There's a handout that I like on therapistaid.com that you all can check it out. But this one's on fair fighting rules. I'll go through each point briefly, but there's a link at the end of the webinar that you can quickly go to this handout on fair fighting rules. So the first one is identify and acknowledge your own feelings. When you believe a conversation you are having with someone will end in a disagreement or argument, it's important to have self-awareness. So self-awareness is the ability to understand your thoughts, feelings, emotions, and sensations without judgment. With self-awareness, you can respond more rationally and effectively. So first step is to identify and acknowledge your own feelings without judgment. For example, I feel frustrated, not I should be feeling frustrated about this. Then choose the most important topic to talk about. Decide in your mind or out loud what is the most important topic to discuss with the other person. The other person must also agree about the topic to discuss. If there's more than one topic, then decide together whether there's enough time to allot to each topic. Important to avoid any blaming, put downs, criticisms. It doesn't help when we use words that make the other person feel bad about themselves. So avoid using hurtful or criticizing words. Use I statements. For some people, this may take practice. We have an inclination to immediately say, you did this or you did that. It's helpful to pace your response so you can think clearly to use an I statement. It's helpful to put it in practice before an argument too. So for example, if you anticipate an argument, Spend about 10 minutes before you interact with a person and practice I statements, such as, I noticed you didn't take out the garbage last night, instead of, you forgot to take out the garbage last night. Another example, I'm feeling frustrated and when having to repeat myself, instead of, you never listen. No interrupting and listen attentively. The only way we can truly understand what the other person is saying is to hold your tongue and thoughts until the other person finishes their thoughts. Be mindful on how you're feeling in the moment, if feeling triggered by what they're saying, and notice any urges to jump in or interject and defend yourself. Interrupting and thinking about what you're going to say next instead of attentively listening to the other person means you will miss out on important information they say. Avoid ignoring or refusing to speak. Remember the four horsemen? One of them is stonewalling. Notice any urges to shut down or walk away from the argument. If you feel emotionally aroused and your capacity to stay in the conversation has maxed out, and then not acknowledge how you feel and let the other person know you need a break. For example, I'm getting really worked up right now and I don't know how to respond. I need to take a break to cool down. Also let the other person know you're willing to come back to the conversation when you feel calmer. It's important to mind your tone and pitch. When we're angry, it's natural to have a tone that sounds grimacing or aggressive. We can certainly have a tone that signals to the other person we're angry, but it's important to not change the tone so it sounds demeaning, sarcastic, or spiteful. An angry tone is often intense and sharp, but being mindful of your tone allows you to control the delivery of your speech. Removing yourself from the situation. If your arguments tend to get heated up, decide beforehand to mutually agree to let each other know when it's better to walk away from the argument instead of making things worse. Sometimes people use a code word, and if someone says it, then the other person knows the conversation will be paused temporarily and they can walk away without any repercussions. Option to negotiate. Lastly, if you can't walk away from the argument, then another option is to negotiate. Think of creative ways to end arguing or put the conversation on hold until you can find a time to revisit the conversation. For example, if an argument starts in the middle of dinner and you need to take the kids to sport practice, then negotiate with your partner by letting them know you're interested in finding a solution to the problem and suggest to continue conversation tomorrow night after the kids go to bed. Okay, active listening. When our emotions are ramped up, it's difficult to be present with the other person during an argument. So here are some tips to remain in control when feeling intense emotions like fear or anger. So when wanting to be an active listener, one of the first things is to notice how you feel. I can't stress that enough about, self-awareness. You could do this by connecting with your breath. Evaluate how you're breathing. So you're holding your breath or breathing shallow. You might be feeling anxious, guilt, or shame. Are you breathing fast? You might be feeling angry. So to regulate the intensity of your emotions, allow yourself to take a normal breath in through the nose, then a slow exhale through the mouth. So let me demonstrate. So repeat this inhale, exhale cycle a few times until you feel grounded and connected with yourself and the other person. You probably hear the saying in one ear and out the other, or falls on deaf ears. That's because we're most likely focused on what we want to say next instead of paying attention to what the other person has to say. We tend to automatically be on guard to defend ourselves because it's hard to hear someone else tell us what we did wrong. So go back to your breath and don't allow catastrophizing or worrying thoughts get in the way. Focus your attention not only on the person talking, but what they're saying. You could do this by focusing on their eyes, hair, skin, etc. And remind yourself that they're human too and feel difficult emotions just like you. This one is a difficult step, but listen without judging yourself or others. Our brains are hardwired to protect us, so it can immediately jump to conclusions when it detects what someone says as a threat. It's important to recognize your thoughts are just thoughts and not necessarily based on reality. Even if you are sure what they are saying are facts, don't automatically assume that what the person is saying is malicious or hurtful. Sometimes criticism can be hard to take, but if you choose to be open to hearing the other person, there is a learning opportunity, such as responding effectively back to correct or clarify what they said, or accept and change a behavior that is no longer appropriate or respectful. And then one of the last tidbits is reflection. So have you ever spoken to a parrot and they've repeated back exactly what you said? And if the parrot is really smart, it will actually have a conversation with you. But you don't have to be a parrot to be a good listener. You do have to listen attentively enough to understand what the other person is telling you. Unlike parroting, which sounds robotic and mechanical, using reflections interprets what the other person is saying and what emotions they may be feeling. For example, if someone says, "There's so much to do. I'm feeling so overwhelmed. I can't bear to get out of bed to face it all." You can respond, "It sounds like you got a lot on your plate that's causing you to feel depressed." If the person is saying a lot, pick up on main themes or summarize. For example, what you're saying is you have a lot on your plate and it's all too much for you to handle. If the person is emotional, try to identify what emotion they may be feeling. For example, it sounds like you're overwhelmed and worried others may be mad at you for not completing all your work. The key is to try and understand what the other person is conveying. This will help the other person feel heard and understood. In conversations, most people always want to feel heard and understood. Reflections also help to emphasize and validate the other person. Using reflections for the first time can sometimes feel awkward, so keep practicing and truly be yourself. Practice with a trusted friend who can give you honest feedback. Eventually, the words will come out naturally with regular practice. Oh, I guess there's one more tidbit. Um, Another one helpful piece of advice is to apologize. But keep in mind, this doesn't mean you have to apologize for everything, including speaking up and having an opinion or disagreeing with someone. But if you did say something that was against your own morals and values, or you impulsively reacted out of anger or another emotion, then apologize for the specific behavior you didn't mean to do that caused harm to others. Some people have a hard time saying sorry because they carry so much unresolved shame. They've conditioned themselves to not appear weak, inadequate, or insignificant, or they have an unrealistic high sense of self and care only about themselves. Apologizing for something you did to someone you care about is a sign of emotional intelligence and taking ownership for your own actions. Don't apologize and follow up with excuses. For example, "I'm sorry, but I was just tired." Own up to what you're actually apologizing for. Example, "I'm sorry, I forgot fill in the blanks." Or, "That was my fault that I didn't remember to fill in the blanks." If you've never said the words "I'm sorry," then start practicing saying the words to yourself. It may feel awkward at first, but with practice, it does get easier. Once it's easy to say the words, then try this exercise. Imagine a scenario that you take responsibility for your part. Example, you didn't complete your work project on time and made everyone else on your team fall behind, or you blurted out hurtful words. Then visualize yourself clearly saying words of apology, honestly and genuinely. Rehearse this visualization over and over again, if needed, until you feel comfortable in approaching the situation to apologize to the person you hurt. Remember, you don't need to apologize for being alive, having an opinion, making a request, or disagreeing. So lastly, I will cover the antidote to the four horsemen described earlier. Some of these antidotes were already covered in earlier tidbits. I'm repeating some of them with the intention of their importance in building stronger relationships. So the antidote to criticism is using gentle startups. Begin your conversations using I statements instead of you statements. This avoids the other person immediately becoming defensive. This also means you take ownership and accountability for your own behaviors. For example, "I'm really upset and irritated right now. I was wondering if we could talk about the chores." The antidote for contempt is appreciation for others. Everyone has positive qualities, but it's easy to forget when we're in the heat of the moment. Pause, reflect, and remind yourself of the other person's positive attributes. For example, partner forgets to take out the trash again, but partner works hard and takes time to play with the kids before bed. The antidote for defensiveness is taking responsibility. Only own what you believe you did wrong. If you're not sure, allow the emotion of guilt and shame to show up just enough to feel it and to better understand what behaviors got in the way of being the kind of person you really are. For example, you know you're typically a responsible person, but got easily distracted and forgot to take out the garbage. You approach your partner and say, I got distracted by playing video games too long because I had a long, hard day at work, so I forgot to take out the garbage. I will do my best to remember next time. And the last antidote for stonewalling is self-soothing. No one likes to ever feel attacked, especially over and over again relentlessly. It's considered verbal, emotional, and mental abuse. So if you're experiencing verbal attacks or threats, then remember to self-soothe your nervous system and body. You could do this by using any of the senses individually or in combination. So for example, go for a walk in the forest, feel the warm sun on your face, feel the wind blow through your hair, smell the fresh grass or flowers nearby, listen to the birds chirping, or just listen to soft music with inspirational lyrics, or eat a piece of fruit mindfully. Do whatever activity helps you feel soothed. So we're going to go into the next part. This is taking a look at behaviors that lead us to say yes all the time. So for the most part, human beings are kind, thoughtful, helpful, and giving, among other great attributes. And if someone asks for our help, we usually want to help. What makes us also great as human beings is sometimes we offer help without being asked. However, problems start to occur when there is an imbalance between giving and receiving. If we tend to give more and others take instead of giving back, or we're receiving less from others, then it can cause significant problems in relationships. This give-take exchange can be something physical, like money or gifts, or can be invisible, like our time or emotional and mental energy. Some people who define giving away their time excessively call themselves people pleasers. People pleasers are people who prioritize their needs, desires, and opinions of others over their own. If you're not sure if you're a people pleaser, I put a link for a people pleasing quiz at the end of the webinar. Note that this quiz does not diagnose, but may highlight behaviors you may or may not be aware of. So let's look at some factors that may or may not contribute to people pleasing behaviors. Growing up with a primary caregiver whose attention and love was inconsistent, meaning attention from caregivers was conditional. For example, a child learns they need to get straight A's on the report card to get praise from parents or caregivers, or caregivers are sometimes warm and affectionate, but other times cold and distant. Another possible reason is growing up with a primary caregiver who is unpredictable and chaotic, leaving the child to feel confused and fearful of attention from the caregiver. Possible childhood abuse like neglect, physical or sexual abuse. Growing up in a patriarchal nuclear family household where the father was the lead of the house. The following issues are more likely to be correlated with the aforementioned, like anxiety disorders, poor self-esteem, fear of rejection or abandonment, the fawn trauma response, which is the fourth trauma response, and fight or flight response system, which is we appease to avoid or reduce risk of harm by others. Sometimes masking ADHD symptoms to fit in, meaning to not be rejected or seen as different by other people. What behaviors do we see in people pleasing? Sometimes we see putting others before ourselves, saying yes to doing things for others, even though you really want to say no, feeling resentment when doing something for someone, struggle to say no or set boundaries for fear of getting rejected or abandoned, being quiet, reserved, difficulty speaking up for themselves, quickly agreeable to mostly everything, little opinions or disagreeing, and feeling deep shame or guilt if saying no. So I found this funny short clip on boundaries, but I also thought it sent an important message. We'll watch the video clip really quickly, but ask yourself, what do you think the underlying message is? If you can, I didn't realize before doing this webinar that you can't use the chat function. So it might just be something that you just think to yourself what the underlying message is.
What should I do if I set a boundary with someone and they still keep mistreating me? Well, you stop spending time with them until they can work on their behavior. What if their feelings are hurt? You mean, what if they have a negative experience after doing something wrong to someone? Yeah, that's called a consequence. Oh.
So my thoughts are, regardless how people treat you, it is out of your control. What's within your control is establishing healthy boundaries. And this is what we're going to talk about next. So there are countless ways to set healthy boundaries, but the first step is getting to know yourself better. Again, can't stress enough about the self-awareness. What this might look like is understanding and knowing your true values, your likes and dislikes, and your limitations. There are many ways to set healthy boundaries, but I found this poster online to help get you started. Here's some helpful ways to set healthy boundaries. So decide how much personal information you share with others. Keep in mind that not everyone wants to hear your whole life story or every detail about a significant event, even if it was important to you. Know your audience. If they're a close friend or family member, you may share more than with someone who's a neighbor or acquaintance. Be mindful of the other person's time too. Don't monopolize all the talk time. Share, then ask questions. Listen to the other person talk. Share some more, and so forth. Instead of trying to fit in, express yourself authentically. This is where knowing who you are can be helpful. If you're not sure, think of a time when you felt your safest around someone. Then ask yourself, what was I like? How did I behave? For this one, I spent a lot of time self-reflecting and self-evaluating before I learned how to respect myself and honor my personal boundaries with friends and family. Don't feel guilty about needing space or taking a break. Listen to your gut feeling. If you feel your social battery depleting, exit or excuse yourself gracefully. I know with my anxiety, I have mastered this skill very well. Next one, respect the opinion of others and respect yourself to having opinions too. Everyone is entitled to their opinions. Remember, it's still an option and choice to accept other people's opinions. For this one, I learned that it's okay to speak up and express my opinion, and it's okay for not everyone to accept or approve my opinion, but expressing myself improves my self-respect. Next one, remember, opposite of yes is no, so if it doesn't sit right with you, listen to your gut instinct. Practicing saying no to yourself, then out loud. Visualize yourself saying no confidently in uncomfortable situations. Your brain doesn't know the difference between what is real or imagined. With practice, it will feel easier and natural to say no without feeling guilty or scared. I used to be a people pleaser and would bend over backwards for my family and friends. I ended up feeling resentful towards them and myself. In time, I learned how to set boundaries to respect my time and energy. The next one is respecting yourself by choosing wisely who you want to spend your time with. Your time is sacred too. Don't feel obliged or coerced to spend time with people who make you feel unsafe, uncomfortable, or less than. For this one, I appreciate and adore my friends and some family members, but I also have my limit on how much time I can spend with them. I learned again to respect myself by exiting gracefully without the need to give a reason. Spending time alone, working on personal growth, or just being by yourself to enjoy doing things you love doing, whether that be reading, going for hikes, shopping, doing crafts, etc. With this one, I really love my alone time, or just sitting being quiet for a short time. Allows me to think, process things, and self-reflect without overthinking or overanalyzing. I try not to be judgmental, but make space for learning something from my experiences, whether the experience was positive or negative. And the last one is learning skills to speak up for yourself, especially when someone makes fun of you, puts you down, accuses you of something you didn't do, etc. This one took me a while to establish for myself, especially because I was bullied in school. but standing up for myself means I value and respect myself more than the ones who are trying to put me down. So I hope this list is a good starting point for anyone needing to set healthy boundaries for themselves and with others. Please know that this is not a limited list. You can also Google search online for other ways to set healthy boundaries. So the next part, we're going to move on to how, not being able to trust people, but needing help. Just curious if you've ever heard of the term hyperindependence. It's a psychological term rooted in attachment theory and trauma, where a child learned they can't rely on detached and unreliable parents. They learn to be self-reliant quickly and distrust and detach from others, even when they desperately need help. Other ways to describe this behavior are counterdependency and apparent competence. Essentially, there is nothing wrong with being independent. In fact, our Western culture strongly drills this concept into us. However, it does become a problem when a person becomes overly self-reliant to the point of burnout or overwhelmness. So here's some traits of hyperindependence and what it looks like in a person. So these examples I made up, but they do have traits of hyperindependence. So see if you can relate to any of these people. So a parent of 3 children under age 10. So a parent is in their mid-30s who works full-time, then on certain evenings is a volunteer leader on the school council, then other nights coaches the kids' sports teams. Then on weekends, gets the kids ready and take them to all of their extracurricular activities or birthday parties. In between all that running around, creates a weekly meal plan, then shop for groceries and other necessities for the family. Every day we'll cook the dinners, clean up the house, prepare baths, check homework, and prepare kids' lunches for the next day. Then during the free time, plans and organizes all family appointments, pays bills, and plans for family events and trips. Phew. The next one. A senior executive of a large company who takes on multiple big projects consecutively, attends all meetings either virtually or in person, constantly making or taking phone calls and answering emails, working overtime during the week to complete work that others forgot to do, and sometimes works on the weekends, especially when project deadlines are due. A young person in a new relationship who's loving, caring, and fun, but struggles to open up and share personal information about their interests or family. Sometimes the young person is guarded and doesn't like answering the phones or texts. So how do you know if you or someone you know is hyper-independent? They may exhibit some of these signs. Note that anyone who has these traits doesn't necessarily mean you are hyper-independent. These signs have to be significantly negatively impacting the person's well-being and life. Overachieving, taking on more that they can handle. Refusing to ask for help. Someone who genuinely needs help but doesn't ask for help because from their experience they learned that they were let down by others. Guardedness and secretiveness, afraid to open up and share intimate information about themselves in case it is used against them. They may act hot or cold one day, cuddling the next day, then suddenly they want their space and won't explain why. Mistrust in others. If someone experiences betrayal, especially at a young age, they will quickly learn they can't trust or have difficulty trusting what someone says. For example, as a child, if your parent promised to take you to the park but keeps making excuses or forgetting, then the child learns they can't trust what the parent says. Instead, they learn to play by themselves. Then when the parent actually wants to take them to the park, the child will appear disinterested or unexcited, but reluctantly goes. Or mistrust in other ways may look like trust on the surface, but their actions show something different, like asking lots of questions, being very detail-oriented when checking your work, or being suspicious of your intentions or whereabouts. High risk of chronic stress and burnout. When there is a significant imbalance between what you're giving of yourself to others versus what you're receiving from others or giving yourself, then there's a high likelihood of experiencing chronic stress, which can lead to burnout. This can manifest in mental health issues like depression and anxiety, and physical health complaints like digestive issues, pain, headaches, etc. Turned off from clinginess. A hyper-independent person dislikes anyone who is perceived as too needy. They will pull away and detach from a clinging person, making them look cold and distant. Their lack of emotional connectedness is tied into not having trust in others and lack of consistent nurturing care from a primary caregiver. And lastly, a few close friends. When someone who is hyper-independent has a hard time opening up and trusting others, they end up having very few close friends. They may have only one very good best friend. That friend usually is also hyper-independent and understands and respects the person's time and personal boundaries. So how to ask for help? To not oversimplify this communication style of assertiveness, it's important to take the following into consideration. So these set of skills is taken from Marshall Linehan's dialectical behavior therapy for interpersonal effectiveness skills. They use the acronym DEAR MAN to communicate your objective, which may be a need or saying no effectively. So the first skill is describe. When describing the situation, only state the facts. Be clear, concise, and direct. Keep your sentences short instead of run-on sentences. For example, if the situation at home and spouse was at home and spouse wasn't cooking dinner yet, then spouse could say, I didn't cook dinner yet, instead of, I've spent all day running around cleaning the house, making appointments for the kids, doing errands, etc. The second skill is express. Express how you feel in the moment in relation to the situation you just described, not how you felt last week. For example, I feel tired, instead of, I'm so exhausted after doing so much this week. I'm stressed with everything I have to do. I can't stand it, and so on. The following set of skills don't have to be used in order or applied depending on the situation. And it's understandable if any of the skills are difficult to apply if you've never asked for help. But with regular practice, it gets easier. The third skill is assert. This is where we get to ask for what we want. Assert is not the same as being a passive-aggressive, whiny, or evasive. So form your words into a question, not a statement or a demand. For example, can you help me with dinner tonight? Not, I'm so hungry. I don't have anything prepared to start cooking dinner. The kids look very hungry too. I just don't know what to do. Or cook dinner now. The fourth skill is reinforce. Using a reinforcing statement helps the other person follow through with what you're asking. Reinforcers are not an or else statement. Reinforcers are not threats or ultimatums. It's usually a way to let the person know why it would be important for them to help you. For example, I really appreciate it. Or, I know I will feel less stressed and easier to be around if you cook dinner tonight. Not, cook dinner tonight or I won't speak to you. The fifth skill is staying mindful. When faced with someone who quickly dismisses or invalidates or is stressed themselves, it's easy to get pulled into their issues and forget your objective. Being mindful is staying in your lane and keep your focus on your objective. Ignore any eye rolling or verbal attacks. Sometimes you may need to repeat your question and reinforcing statements a few times. The sixth skill is appearing confident. How you communicate and deliver your words are so important than the words you choose to say. A firm tone and neutral pitch, along with confident body language, can help to deliver the message clearly. So eye contact, standing up straight, relaxed facial expression, not eyes downcast, shuffling your feet, or slouch position. If you have a hard time acting confident, then I usually channel someone I look up to that I know is confident, just like the saying goes, fake it until you make it. And the last skill is negotiate. This is the last card you can draw to ask for help. This may be a difficult skill to use if you're so used to doing things on your own. So remember, practice makes permanence. Depending on the situation, we may need to negotiate to ask for someone to help us. Be willing to give to get, but not overdo it. For example, I can understand you had a hard day at work and are tired too. How about we take 15 minutes to relax, then we can both cook dinner together. That way dinner will get done faster and we can both have a relaxing night. Or how about you cook a simple dinner tonight and I'll cook dinner tomorrow. Again, you may not always need to use every skill in every conversation. It all depends on the situation and the context of the conversation. For example, if two people know the facts of the situation and understand how they feel about it, then there's no need to describe and express. Simply move into asking for what you need help with. Remember, if you're the type that is so independent that it's hard to ask for help, keep practicing. Start with a small request for help, like asking for more copy paper at work or asking for help chopping vegetables to get your brain used to the idea. We'll move into the last part here on loneliness and why is it a problem. So according to Stats Canada, about 70% of youth aged 15 to 24 stated they always or often felt lonely. With older adults aged 65 and over, about 10% stated they feel lonely. There is an epidemic of men feeling lonely. According to CMHA Ontario, that's Canadian Mental Health Association of Ontario, about 1 in 2 men feel socially isolated. If they live alone, that percentage goes up to 73%. So feeling alone or loneliness is a perception. People who are alone don't always feel lonely, while other people who are surrounded by loved ones can feel lonely. Some of the reasons for youth and young adults are largely due because of an increase in social media, too many online interactions instead of in-person connections, pressures to compare themselves to media influencers that filter their lives to look perfect, and a lack of sense of belonging among their peers. Loneliness is different than social isolation, of course. Social isolation means people lack access to social connections because of geographical location, mobility, or lack of access to resources and services. Why is loneliness a problem? Because it can have detrimental effects to our mental and physical well-being. It can affect work productivity and family life, which impacts the economy, and it can put an overall strain on the healthcare system, increase wait times for mental health services, and overwhelm primary care services. However, there are ways to beat loneliness, and I'll share some tidbits. How to meet and make new friends. Let's face it, making friends as an adult is hard. As children, it was easier because there was usually some kind of consistency in their lives, whether it was going to school, playing sports, or participating in extracurricular activities. As an adult, it gets harder because life changes when you start working, building a family, moving, or changing jobs. Sometimes it gets a lot harder when you're a senior because of health or mobility issues, transportations, death of a spouse or friends, etc. So is it still possible to make friends as an adult? Absolutely. So what does it take to make new friends? First, take time to understand yourself better. What you were like in your 20s is different than when you were in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and above. Know your interests, likes, and dislikes. Second, understand what you're looking for in a friend. Do you enjoy long conversations or just want to spend quality time doing a fun activity? Third, one of the best ways to meet new people is joining groups or clubs that share the same interests as you. There's typically already something to talk about if you have similar interests and likes with someone else. You can look online at meetup.com or your local newspaper for ads about groups and clubs. Sometimes your local community center offers social clubs or group activities. Fourth, if you are the social anxious type, then try joining a social group online. Meeting someone online versus in person can be less anxiety provoking because we usually feel safer in our own environment. Some social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest have a lot of groups you can join and share your interests. Fifth, allow yourself to do things out of your comfort zone. As an anxious person, I used to turn down a lot of invitations, or if I did go out, I would usually stay quiet. Now I give myself the benefit of the doubt and remind myself I'm human and it's okay to be nervous. Someone else might be nervous too. Reminding yourself that you're not the only one feeling nervous can put you at ease and more likely to join in. 6, Reading the room is observing how others interact with you. Notice if they're engaging or reciprocating in the conversation. If they seem disinterested, don't be discouraged. Validate yourself for trying, but also remember not everyone clicks with everyone. So don't force yourself to change just to be liked by someone else. Observe how you feel after an interaction. If you feel excited or energized, then the connection was good and hopefully the feeling was mutual. 7th, initiate and make the first move. Someone usually has to make the first move, so why not be you? Believe in yourself that you are good enough to be around. Scan environments where you frequent, like the coffee shop, workplace, gym, etc. Maybe there's an acquaintance you've seen and appear friendly, but never really engaged in conversation. Have a few ideas in mind of what to talk about. Then when you see them, approach them, introduce yourself, and mention something or ask a question in connection with the environment you're in. So try some of these ideas or come up with your own. Hopefully one of these ideas will get you some new friends. So this concludes the webinar. Before we go, I'd like to close this webinar with a quote. Communication to a relationship is like oxygen to life. Without it, it dies. What does this quote mean to you?